welcome back to my channel. I am here to finally give you the breakdown of President Trump's proclamation on the suspension of immigration into the United States for a period of 60 days. I just watched the Coronavirus Task Force press briefing, and President Trump mentioned that right before walking into the press briefing, he did sign the executive order. I kept refreshing the Federal Register's website looking for the executive order. It never showed up till I found it on the White House's website, whitehouse.gov. So I'm just gonna go through the main topics and explain what it means, so that way you will know if it applies to your situation. Okay, so it starts now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States, so on and so forth, hereby proclaim the following. Section 1. The entry into the United States of aliens as immigrants is hereby suspended and limited subject to Section 2. Okay. What does Section 2 say? It's about the scope. Basically, the suspension and limitation of entry pursuant to the section I just read shall only apply to aliens who are outside of the U.S. on the effective date of this proclamation. And I'll tell you the effective date just so anybody's wondering. The effective date is April 23rd, 2020 at 11:59 p.m. So 11:59 p.m. tomorrow night is the date that this proclamation takes effect. Okay, so anyone who on that date and time is outside of the United States and does not have an immigrant visa that is valid on the effective date of that proclamation. What that means is if you don't have that immigrant visa stamp, the I-551 stamp that it shows that you would be entering as a permanent resident, if you don't have that already, then this applies to you. Also, if you do not have an official travel document other than a visa, such as a transportation letter, an appropriate boarding foil, or an advance parole document. So as of tomorrow, the 23rd at 11:59 p.m., if you're outside of the United States and you don't have a valid immigrant visa and you don't have a official travel document like an advance parole document or a transportation letter or an appropriate boarding foil, then this applies to you. Anyone else, it doesn't apply to. So what I just read, that section talks about who this proclamation applies to. It applies to those individuals who are currently outside of the United States and don't have an official travel document and don't have a valid immigrant visa, a valid I-551 stamp already stamped in their passport. So this proclamation applies to them. Now, further on, subsection B talks about what the suspension limitation on entry does not, this is who it does not apply to. So it does not apply to any lawful permanent resident of the United States. So if you are already a lawful permanent resident, you're not prohibited from entering the United States. Second, if you are seeking to enter on an immigrant visa as a healthcare professional or a family member of a healthcare professional. Lawful permanent residents, this doesn't apply to you. If you're entering as a healthcare professional, this does not apply to you. Next, any alien applying for a visa to enter the United States pursuant to the EB-5 Immigrant Investor Program. So if you're outside of the United States and you're investing that $1 million into the EB-5 Investor Program, we're not going to leave you out. We're going to let you in. So it doesn't apply to you if you invested in the EB-5 Investor Program. Go figure. Okay. Next, any alien who is the spouse of a United citizen. So if you're married to a United States citizen, you're not prohibited from entering. It also does not apply to anyone who's under the age of 21 and is a child of the United States citizen. So spouses of U.S. citizens, it doesn't apply to you, and children that are under 21 of U.S. citizens. Next, the proclamation does not apply to any alien whose entry would further important United States law enforcement objectives as determined by the Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security, so on and so forth. Any member of the United States Armed Forces and any spouse and children. Any alien seeking to enter the United States pursuant to a special immigrant visa. And the last one, my particular favorite, any alien whose entry would be in the national interest as determined by the Secretary of State, Secretary of Homeland Security. So beneficiaries of national interest waiver petitions, you will not be kept out. So if you have an approved NIW and you're abroad, you will be allowed to obtain your immigrant visa and come in and move to the United States. Great news. Okay, here's regarding the implementation and enforcement. It states, the consular officer shall determine in his or her discretion whether an immigrant has established his or her eligibility for an exception in Section 2B of this proclamation. So all those exceptions that I mentioned, lawful permanent resident, you're a member of the United States Armed Forces, or you're a spouse or child of a U.S. citizen, or if you're in the national interest of the United States, it'll be left up to the consular officer at the embassy abroad to determine whether someone meets those exceptions, whether they're a lawful permanent resident already, whether they're married to a U.S. citizen, whether they're in the national interest, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, if you're classified as in the national interest, you have your approval notice to prove it. Obviously, there's ways to prove your applicability for a certain exception. But basically, it's saying that the determination will be made by a consular officer at the embassy abroad. Now, I hope no one forgot that the embassies outside of the United States are already closed. They're still closed due to COVID-19. So does this suspension have any effect as of right now? Not really. But let's say if it does get extended and the embassies open back up and this proclamation is extended because of the concern for the economy in the United States, then it would have some more effect. But just a thought. What's next? I mentioned the effective proclamation date. Yeah, signed by Donald J. Trump. So I couldn't wait to make this video. I definitely wanted to give you the update and breakdown. So it does not apply to anybody that is inside the United States already. It does not apply to anyone who is currently in the process of filing an immigrant petition. It does not have any effect on your I-140s, your I-130s, if your I-485s, for example. It essentially doesn't really have much effect, much impact if you're here in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, processing is not stopping. Service centers are still open. You can still file your cases. They will still be processed regularly. It kind of doesn't really matter because you're not able to attend the interview at the embassy abroad to get the permission to come in, to get the visa to come in. So you're kind of in the same position you were before. But for those of you that have already an approved immigrant petition and you already went to your interview and got the I-551 stamp, you're still going to be allowed to enter. Anyone who is within the next 60 days is going to have, for example, their I-140s approved if you're in the national interest, and that case is approved. Your interview still probably won't be scheduled within the next 60 days because of the suspension of in-person services at the embassies. But assuming it reopened, you would be allowed to attend your interview and prove to the consular officer that you meet one of the exceptions in subsection 2B of this proclamation. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions regarding the proclamation, anything that was still left unclear, go ahead and leave it in the comments and I'll definitely respond to you. I appreciate you watching and I'll see you in the next video.